Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Diana's Talk Show. Today, I wanted to talk about two books that I read recently that changed my life. The first book I'm going to talk about is The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F by Mark Manson. And the second book I'm going to talk about is How to Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. I don't have the physical copy of these books because I rented them from the public library. Shout out to the New York Public Library and public libraries everywhere for making reading free and accessible. But yeah, the downside is that I can't refer to it whenever I want. But I return those books to the library after I finish reading them. I do that because then I'll forget to return them and then I'll just keep putting it off. And I'm a regular at the public library, so I don't want to mess anything up for myself. But yeah, so I'm going to get into how the subtle art of not giving an F. What I like about this book is the casual tone. So the author speaks in, curse words, there's dark humor, and it's very practical and straight to the point. So if you're someone who doesn't like fluffy language or flowery language, but you want to give self-improvement a chance, definitely read this book. So I liked it because yes, it was to the point, but it was also so tender because the author shares his personal anecdotes and personal stories in it. So I felt like I was reading a letter from a friend, or like I was having a conversation with a friend, but in a book form. A vivid memory I have reading this book was on the subway. So I read a lot on my commutes, whether it's the subway or the bus or any downtime that I have. I take out the book and I just read a few pages. So I was sitting on the subway reading this book, and I was on this page where Mark Manson was talking about telling a story about a friend he had who passed away, and like how that experience was. And Mark Manson wrote that weeks after his friend passed away, he dreamt with him. He had many dreams with that friend, and in one of the dreams, in his sleep, Mark Manson asked his friend, or told his friend, "I'm sorry that you died." And his friend in the dream replied, "Why are you sorry that I died when you're afraid to live?" And like that stuck with me. It was like a tender thing to read because it's like so personal, and I was like, oh, like I felt like I was having like a heart to heart with a friend who shared something from their past that impacted them. And like that line, I will never forget it. Why are you sorry that I died when you're afraid to live? Because then it's like, yeah, like it just gave a reminder that bad things things happen, and like life goes on, and you have to just control how you see it. Like, you could get bogged down by things that happened in the past, by sad things that happened in the past, but then you can get bogged down by loss, but you have to move forward too, and you can't like let that take you down, because at the end of the day, we're alive, and being alive is a privilege. It's something that we can often take for granted, because it's like, oh yeah, we're just here and we're just getting caught up in everyday life things. But, that story that Mark Manson shared gave me a reminder to be present and to be brave. Another thing that Mark Manson talked about in the book is a concept he made up called VCR problems. So like he calls it VCR problems, but it just means that you have a problem that has a simple solution, but it gets clouded. Your judgment gets clouded because of the emotions attached to that problem. So Mark Manson gave two examples, or he gave a few examples, but these are the two that stood out to me. So one example was if a guy that is afraid to ask out a girl, and he's like, how do I do it? Like, and then another girl, she's in med school, but she hates it. And she's like, how do I drop out? And the Mark Manson said the answer to all of these scenarios is just do it. Like, it's very simple. Like, if you want to drop out, dropping out of school is fairly simple. Or if you want to ask someone out, that's simple. You just talk to them and ask them on a date. But it's the emotions that you have attached to the outcome or the fear that you have attached to that scenario that makes it hard. But at the end of the day, like it's a simple thing, but obviously there's like other things that make it complicated, like fear, other people's expectations, fear of rejection, but it's fairly simple, so that stood out to me. I'll move on to the next book. The next book was Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. So the concept of Steal Like an Artist is that nothing artists do is original, because artists take bits and pieces from everything they like and they mix it to make their own artwork. So Austin Kleon says we all have a artist family tree. So he, like, in the book, he tells us to make our artist family tree, meaning, okay, I'm inspired by this artist, they were inspired by this artist and this artist and this artist, and it goes up. So he's like, make your artist family tree, like see who that artist that you love who was inspired by, because if you notice, like any artist, they have someone that they're really, you can tell kind of like, oh, I feel like they were inspired by this era of art or this time, they have this style that they crafted to make their own style, but in essence it comes from other things. Something that what I like about the book is that it's very practical, and he gives tips that you can apply right away, which I did. One of the tips he said was to get a logbook. A logbook is basically a small journal that you can take with you anywhere, but he was inspired by sailors, because sailors, when they would go on these expeditions, they had to keep track of everything, like where they went, because then that helped them keep track of how far they came, and like helped them make a map, like, oh, there was this tree here, and a logbook is like that, because you can write down your artistic influences, so you can keep track of how far you came. Like if you what I do is, when I read that page, like that little, those few pages Austin Kleon had where he explained the logbook, I went to Blick art store. I went to the art store and I got this like small sketchbook, and I bring it with me everywhere. This is my prized possession now. And I'm like, wow, like how was I living before without a small book where you can just like write everything? This is like my journal. I write everything, like all my thoughts. One thing I do, an example of like how I log my artistic influence is literally like anything I like. Like I'm a person who listens to the same song over and over, or I have an album or a certain artist on repeat. I write it down. I'm like, oh, on this day I had this song on repeat. And I'm also a writer. I like to write. So I listen to song lyrics a lot. And if a song lyric stands out, I write it down. Also, you can write down what movies you saw. Like I write down like, oh, I saw this film on this day and this is what I liked about it, or this is what stood out to me about that movie. Because then later on I can keep track. Like I can look back and I'm like, oh, this is what I was into at this time. And that's where I can draw inspiration from, because you have a kind of a file of things that you like, and then it informs you about your tastes. And it's like, oh, I guess you can analyze it like, oh, what do all these things have in common about what I want to express in my own art, And what's interesting about that concept of steal like an artist, of like taking from your influences, is that I was doing it unconsciously, now I can do it consciously because I know about this concept, but I feel like artists just do it naturally. We just do it unconsciously. When I was starting to make my short documentary, I'm currently working on a short documentary for my thesis project for school. So I'm a film major, I'm a college senior, and for our thesis project, we have to make a short film, right? So when I was thinking about the idea for that, I was like, what do I make this about? What do I make a short documentary about? I looked back and, at that time, I watched an Agnes Varda documentary, and it was called Faces Places. I saw Faces Places and I really liked a specific scene, and that stuck with me. So I was like, how do I get the essence of it and recreate it in my own film? And I didn't know that I was stealing like an artist. I was just doing it. Like I was like, okay, like how can I draw inspiration without plagiarizing, Like we don't want to plagiarize either, but you can take basically like you can take from a bunch of different influences and then make your own thing. So so I didn't know that I was stealing like an artist, because that was before I read this book. But then when I was reading this book, I was like, oh my God, I do all of these things already. Like, and I was not conscious of it. So that was really cool. But yeah, so that's pretty much a quick rundown of the books I read recently. Let me know what you think, and if this inspired you to go check out these books too. What is cool too is that each of the authors has an extended, they're young, like, you know, like probably like, I don't know, like in middle age or whatever, and they have external resources that are like continuations of their book. So Mark Manson has a YouTube channel that I've watched his videos now. They're self-help videos that are like continuation of the lessons and teachings he has in his book. And Austin Kleon, I'm on his newsletter. I subscribe to his Substack newsletter, and I read it. So it's cool that like these authors also have an extended resources and extended communication, you know. So that's cool. Check out my newsletter. I'll put the link below. I post on my newsletter twice a month, and so check that out. Thank you so much for watching. That brings us to the end of the video, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Bye.